Welcome to the Beyond Deadlines podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and schedule leaders come across on a day-to-day basis. My name is Micah Piippo, and I'm the CEO of Movar US, a project management-based consultant.
And I'm Greg Lawton, the CEO of an AI schedule management company called Lawton.
Each episode is specifically designed to give you tactics and strategies you can use on a day-to-day basis in planning, scheduling, and project management. Today, we're going to tackle a career challenge. Greg is going to be on the hot seat, and he's going to be trying to get from a senior scheduler at a large GC into an owner's program. We'll think of this as one of the FANG companies like Google, Meta, or Amazon, and trying to make that big jump from GC to owner. We'll be asking him interview questions, and since I've done this, I will be grading him on what his answers will be. Greg, are you ready?
Yes, I am. I am very ready.
Well, Greg, it's nice to meet you today. I'm glad you could take the call. Before we dive in, let me tell you a little bit about the interview process. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and at the very end, I'm going to leave you with very limited time to ask your own questions. You ready to begin?
I'm very excited to be here, Micah. Thank you for the opportunity. That sounds great. Let's get in.
Perfect. I've interviewed about 30 to 40 people already for this role, so hopefully you're special. Greg, why don't you tell me, just to kick things off, a little bit of why you're interested in construction scheduling at this company?
Wonderful. So I think that actually comes down to three things. Number one, ever since I was very young, I've been incredibly interested and had a real drive and a purpose to build big things. It started out, you start with Lego and you start with Connects and sets like that. Then you go into house projects with, in my case, my father, like decking, sheds, rooms, etc. Then you go into university, you do engineering and physics, and you build bigger things like carts and engines. And then eventually you end up in construction. And I have ended up more in the tech areas, so the data center, the chip fab side of the world. And I just like the challenge of building very big things in high performance areas. And what I mean by high performance areas is this is not about 25-year horizon projects that may or may not pan out that are funded by government. These are very defined things that we need to get up and running in short timescales, and that creates a lot of excitement. That then comes to number two, which is really about the excitement of these things and the pace. So we're in a big boom at the moment, a data center boom, which means that not only is the excitement and the pressure there, but also the opportunity. We're in an opportunity here where I can, if I am capable of joining, get into a learning cycle where I can accelerate my learning of how to build these data centers within 1 year. That's one of the things that I'm hoping to have this. And then the third thing is actually, before this interview, I've got a number of friends who've worked for you, and I've gone on LinkedIn and found out a number of people who work for you now, and I actually interviewed all of them. Not just for yourself, but for some of your competitors. Because I was thinking, if I'm going to make this jump from a GC to a client, I want to make the most coherent and informed jump possible. And from all of my interviews, apparently, you're the most mature in your scheduling and project controls practice. You're the most forward thinking. And actually, in the opinions of the people in the industry, you're the most likely to win. I'm only going to work with winners. That's really why I'm here today.
Wow. Well, paint my nose brown. To me, I thought that was a really solid answer. My only critique would be a little on the long side for a first answer, and I'm being a little petty there, but I like to hear just a little bit of a shorter intro answer, because you kind of can start, even though that was really, perfectly structured. I love how you drew people in with that personal story. It showed that you did the research and you talked to other people and you kind of had this nice arc. I would just try and condense it down a little bit for a first question answer, because sometimes people, you kind of start to run, but overall, great answer. Okay. So Greg, thank you for giving me a little bit of background. Let's dive into it. So in this role specifically, you're going to be working as an owner scheduler, and you're going to be managing a set of GCs and their projects and their portfolios that fall underneath them. So let's just walk through one project, and then we'll build up more and more in a hypothetical scenario. So let's say at the very beginning, you're working with an owner's team. The GC hasn't been brought on board yet. how are you going to then build a schedule for the team that will show what this project will be?
Okay, I think that's a very interesting question. I think we need to zoom out for a second here because it's the things before the schedule. So what I'd be looking at here is what is the strategy of the organization? What are the optioneers that need to be put into the strategy and ultimately the schedule build? And what are the standards for the contracts, the data flows, the GCs that you've historically worked with, the historic projects, these kinds of things? Because they paint the backdrop to which I will need to build something. I can't just jump in and build a schedule without context. There's real reason behind that. And quite honestly, I'm going to have to do a lot of interviewing of people internally to get that backdrop of context that I don't have today on this call. But for the sake of brevity, let's assume that I've done that and that it's the simplest thing possible. What I'd be looking to do, first and foremost, is we're thinking here about how are we going to manage a relationship and how are we going to communicate expectations within the organization? That's fundamentally what we're trying to do here. For managing the GC, I'd be looking at influencing the contract and putting in place a very robust schedule management process. We can go into that if you'd like. I don't have to explain it in great deal if you don't.
Well, for this, let's just step back. This is the start of the owner's plan. We don't have a GC on board yet. We're looking for what's that owner's level plan for the schedule. Focus on that street.
Okay, I'll just go straight into that and say what I'd do is I'd pull together, I'd ask for whatever you've done previously. If you've got, for example, I've worked with standard templates before, but also bespoke templates, I'd pull those together. And then you'd just adjust it to the expectations. So if your standard template is for 2 gigawatts, 2 megawatt, whatever it is, and now we're building 8, then we adjust it that way. And I just build a very high level 2, level 3 schedule to give a general view of the main milestones and components of how it's going to be. And then, to be honest, I'd look for the GC to add flavor to that as we go through a procurement process.
Pretty good. Pretty good. I think you missed one component there.
Go on.
To me, you missed bringing in the rest of the team. So when you're in this interview process, most likely you're going to be interviewing with someone who's potentially not the scheduling manager. They'll bring in like the engineering design manager. And what you want to say when you start building that initial owner's level schedule, you're going to bring in everybody for all their opinions and feedback and get the team aligned and get them, set on the plan going forward. That way it's a team effort and you're thinking of others. Grabbing the template's great. Context is perfect. You had it right teed up to just say, and then I would bring in the team for a workshop or a review or some sort of kumbaya. That would have just been absolutely perfect. And then I think you were getting a little over your skis and you're chomping at the bit to bring in that GC. A lot of large owner programs, most of their projects stay in that planning phase. And so the GC is one part of it. And it depends on in your job resume and in your research, not resume, the job posting, how much they spoke about, are you just a straight GC scheduler? Are you running an owner's program? I would lean always towards running an owner's program because that's a higher level, bigger function. You look more cool, important type deal than just GC review. All right, let's move on to the next one. See if you can continue your hot streak here or I can get you rattled. Okay, Greg, we have the owner's level schedule and you mentioned the general contractor a little bit. Let's dive more into that. You're setting up just the RFP for a GC to bring them on board. You've mentioned building out that level 2, 3 schedule. How do you look at hosting an RFP, reviewing a set of GCs, and then picking the best one?
Okay, can I ask some questions here?
Yes, you may.
Do you have an internal RFP scoring process led by another department like procurement?
Yes.
Okay. How much influence does scheduling really have over that?
It depends how good of friends you are with the procurement department. Me personally, I hooked a dude up with some Blazer tickets one time, and I have great friends. We can change whatever we want.
Another question. Do you have anti-bribery and anti-corruption policies?
He technically paid me face value for those tickets. So yes, we do. And I followed.
Okay. And another question is, do you historically give GCs free rein to submit what they think the best schedule is, or do you give them a template from which they have to make changes?
We have historically gave them free rein.
Okay. Final question. How's that panned out?
We get a mixed bag of GC schedules in typically. Normally we provide the deadline or the end of the project. And so it appears that they do a backwards pass. If we don't provide the deadline of the project, they're usually within a range of a quarter or two. My assumption is someone's leaking out when they think the project should finish, and they just simply know, when it's been done.
Got it. Okay. So if we're looking,
Pause 1 second. I just want to highlight one thing for the audience. It is perfectly fine to ask follow-up questions in an interview. If you've listened to Beyond Deadlines at any point in time, Greg and I are constantly asking follow-up questions for clarity, for context. And by asking those follow-up questions, the person who is doing the interview is already starting to follow along your thought process. And a question is much better than an answer because it makes you really seem like technical, like you're getting into it and what you know. So highly recommend when you're doing this, definitely pepper in questions as you go. And it also gives you time to think, as what Greg's probably doing.
it's exactly what I'm doing because Micah didn't tell me any of these questions beforehand. So I'm doing this totally off the cuff.
Let the roast
And
continue.
I've never done the transition from GC to owner scheduler.
I got
So
2 graham crackers and a piece of chocolate. And Greg, you're the marshmallows, buddy. And I'm just roasting you for much more.
okay. So RFP stands for request for proposal. So what we're really asking GCs to do here is we're giving them a set of requirements, and then we're asking them to come to us with their best plan. Now, a request for proposal isn't just for scheduling, it's for a lot of things. So you've got cost, you've got procurement, you've got owner supplied equipment. There's a lot of, basically we're saying, tell us how you deliver this entire project. But from the scheduling component, the first thing I do is I would go and talk to all of the other departments that are asking questions in this RFP or setting requirements to understand where we might have contradictions and when we might be doing the same thing. Because scheduling isn't this bastion on its own. It overlaps a lot of areas and can very heavily influence things like cost or scope, these kinds of things. So I'd go and establish a working group with all of the other leads to understand the core requirements, and I'd get involved in the requirements drafting. Obviously, I would lead the scheduling requirements drafting, but I would actually check and review every bit of requirements drafting in that document. So that's number one, which is go and interview people. The second is I'd look at what is within the bastion of scheduling and only in the bastion of scheduling versus all of those others. And those things are typically standards and processes. So what is the schedule quality we're expecting? Are we going to do a DCMA or are we going to do something more? Are we going to require that checks are done, mathematically logical checks, before a submission? Do we require submissions to be done in XCR format or are we fine with PDF? What's the frequency? I'd look at all of these. I'd also look at core processes. So the example I'm going to give overlaps with commercial. Follow me through. It'd be things like, what is an extension of time process look like? How would change be managed on this project? Because if we're going into an RFP process saying there will be no change, we're lying to ourselves. The final element, which actually comes down that you mentioned, is what information do we release in this? Because we can say, do your best, but if people are leaking dates, or if we're giving dates to some people and not others, really what I need to go and do is go to the head of commercial and say, what is the strategy we're going to do here? And I need to lay some options on the table. Because if we go, no, give us your best dates, and we genuinely keep secrecy, then we're going to get a lot of different strategies from which we can learn. If we say, here is a date that you have to deliver, we still might get some strategies, but we're also going to be getting a lot of compression and flexing within that. So there's all of this. Ultimately, though, this is a bit of an iterative process. So I am just a contributor to what is a process led by procurement. And I need to get in there early, set up working groups, learn, write requirements, and iterate on them very, very quickly, especially with the follow-up questions, to be able to get the best options for the business to then make decisions.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on that one. It was a great answer for the question. Exactly what I'd be looking for. You learned from your past mistakes of not being a lone wolf. You brought in the team. You laid out a structured plan. You're going to review requirements. You're going to get in there. You're going to change it. And In an interview, I may ask a bunch of follow-up questions, but we don't have time, and I want to get to one more interview question before we have to jump. Okay, so we've done the RFP and we've brought the GC on board now. We picked the grand champion winner. And as the owner scheduler, you're not building the schedule, you're help managing the build of the schedule. How do you ensure that general contractor gets set up and builds a world-class schedule and a world-class scheduling process? How do you help guide them through that?
So I think this is again about standards, but this is also about relationships and setting structure. To be very clear here, and I'm going to say a principle, I am not their friend. I'm a colleague. I'm working with them. So I need to be able to have hard conversations, but ones which are geared towards collaborative working. So if we'll set standards in the contract, but it's worth when we're setting up the project for me to go over there to introduce myself and to be very clear about what I expect and what I don't expect, and where we'll be fine and where we'll have problems, and also where I can help and where I can't. Areas, for example, where I can help, if things are being delayed, I am more than happy in a collaborative working environment to start thinking of solutions by which I can buy the GC some extra time in some cases. However, things that are unacceptable are things like the GC trying to hide delays and not upfront mentioning, and me having to do work to go and find them, at which point I'm not going to try my utmost to give them time back. It's about really setting up that relationship more than the analysis.
Right,
The other element.
Let's add a quick follow-up in there. So let's say you've done that. You've had your kumbaya. That seems to be the word of the day in this interview. And then months go by. They submit a couple progress updates. Maybe they switch scheduling managers and things start to fall off the rails. Not necessarily on the project front, but just on their reporting front. The package that you expect is coming in late. Data's not like it should be. They didn't move the data. Just that stuff where you can kind of see the precision and qualities falling off from the scheduling team. What do you do?
So you make a fact-based observation. That's what you do. What you do not do is jump to conclusions. So for example, what I would do is I would say, you have submitted this pack. This is the pack you submitted 6-12 months ago. Factually, this is worse than this. This is my opinion, and this makes me feel like something's dropped off. So it's fact, my feeling, because those two no one can argue with. Then I would ask an open question and saying, is there something I should be concerned about? Am I wrong, or is this going to improve? And what I would also do is I would CC in a small number of people for observation into that, because if I've established my relationships well up front, it's not a socially awkward thing to involve them in that conversation. Obviously, I'm not going to CC in delaying claims experts and legal attorneys and these kind. It's that as step one, and I would just make my expectations known. You never know why these things happen, and it could be a slip of a ball, or it could be something more systemic, who knows. But really, for me to give my owner the best chance of delivering their project on time, which is what I'm responsible for, I actually need to investigate, not conclude. So that's the first thing I'd do.
So let's say you did that. Sent out the email, CC'd people, marginally improves 1 month, and then falls back down the next month. What do you do?
Well, first of all, if it only marginally improves, I'm not accepting that. So at that point, I would call everyone into a meeting, and I would say, here's the standard. Here's the file from 6 months ago that met the standard. Here's last month's file that did not meet that standard. Here's this month's file, which is better, but does not meet that standard. And then I'd be asking someone more senior to evidence to me a process or some kind of competence, as in I have people competent enough to do this, who are actually going to rectify it and reissue that month's program before the next month rolls around. And that to me is, it is bad management to have a conversation and then it only improves a bit and then wait until it drops. No. It improves to the exact standard that you have done before, or there's a very big problem. Again, I am not your friend. I am the owner scheduler. So that's what I do. I get you don't need to get aggressive, but you can get confrontational and just say, these are the facts. I expect this submission because there's a breach of contract.
Perfect. I think the only thing that was potentially missing there, can't remember if you covered it or not, is just I always like to hear discrete escalations because I think that's where a lot of schedulers fall down on the owner side. Is on the GC side, you don't really escalate to a lot of people necessarily. I mean, and it's more of a collaborative team. On the owner side, you really need to be prepared to escalate up the food chain after consecutive fall downs. Because if you're only escalating to like the project manager that's on the project, they have a billion things going on and they don't want this to look bad either. So sometimes just getting that up. I think after reviewing your interview questions and thinking about it, Greg, while I appreciate your time, I don't think we're moving forward with you currently. I think I checked out your LinkedIn profile and it looks like you're a CEO of a company. You also do a podcast. So I don't know if I'll get your full attention on my scheduling job. So thank you for your time. But unfortunately, it's a no from
That's
us.
fine. Let me ask you one more question, if I may, though.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Sorry, I forgot your fight. I already gave you the opinion. I forgot to give you your questions.
Well, no, now I'm going to change my question because of the opinion. Well, I know what I'll do is I'll ask the question that you and I know that everyone should ask in an interview. Have I said anything that has left any question in your mind as why I'm not the best candidate for this role? Or are you walking away with any thought that you will not progress me to the next stage?
That is a great, great question. For this, I think in most situations, if I put myself back at Google or interviewing someone, I'd give you a non-answer because I don't know at this point. I would say you did a great job and we have a lot of great candidates and we're going to have to work through, where you positioned. I
I
think
would
caught.
I wouldn't accept that. I'd be like, okay, fair enough. May
Yeah.
I rephrase? What was the weakest answer in your mind I gave today?
So that's the thing. No one really would ever ask. I've ever been asked that before. I think the weakest answer in my mind, if I think back, was the RFP question, where you started just jumping ahead to the GC review. Sorry, not the RFP question, the one before that, the building an owner schedule,
Mm-hmm.
because you kept jumping ahead to bringing a GC on board, and I was really trying to gear you towards the owner process. So that would probably be the weakest answer.
And then my next one would be, okay, what would a wonderful answer look like in your mind on that? Not.
Yeah. I think we already hashed it out in the answer to it, so I'll just leave it super short. You just needed to bring the team along. That was the whole thing. As you were
Exactly. For the listeners, what I'm basically doing here, there's two schools of thought on this. Number one is you want to objection handle immediately in the scenario. So if you're thinking anything negative about the interview, I need to know that right now, and I need to address it whilst you're on the phone, and I need to leave you with a wonderful taste in your mouth. So that's school of thought number one. School of thought number two is a much more aggressive kind of close,
Yeah.
which I haven't done here, but we've talked about in other videos.
Yeah. No, I completely. The other one that I don't see a lot, that I actually recommended this week to someone who was interviewing for a company. It's called the briefcase close. And it's fairly hard to do these days because you're not meeting in person. But even online, it actually adds some value. You figure out exactly what the company is hiring you for, a couple different work streams. And then what you do is in your 5 to 10 minutes, you can ask Greg's question. And then your second question, instead of asking, how do people like the company? What is someone successful who's going to be here 6 months look like? What's the
In
HR
6 months'
policy?
time, I'm the.
Yeah, yeah. Those are okay questions. That what would blow people's mind is you actually show them work product that puts them forward to improving or showing what you've done. So for example, if you knew that RFP thing was a big question, you would be like, hey, I have a couple thoughts on an improved RFP process. Do you mind if I take a couple minutes to present them to you? And then you just have something canned that's a couple minutes long that shows you've gone out, researched, done the work, and have an RFP process ready to go for them. So that way they know when you step in the door day one, you're off and running. You don't need someone to explain to you what the RFP process is, that they need to work collaboratively, that they need a workshop. You have ideas ready to go. Now, I think where people get stumbled on this is they think that I need this like complete perfect idea that's totally implementable. No, dude, this is an interview, right? So it doesn't need to be perfect. You just need to show that you're like ready to go. and that you have the ideas ready to go. And especially in scheduling these days where everybody has the right canned answer, but no one can actually show their work product, this is a great way to set you apart from the crowd in an interview. Hey, can I just show you this thing really quick, that addresses this or that? And the reason why it's called the briefcase technique is because at the end of the interview, you reach into your briefcase, you pull it out, and you slide it across the table. And it really starts to, because what you're trying to do, and you do it a bit in your question, Greg, you really start to get the person to think about working with you. So when you asked me that question, I started thinking about working with you, and that starts to kind of change the frame and the context of it. So yeah, highly recommend people kind of try that technique out. It's hard to do, not going to lie, but if you nail it, you're in job town.
I think that's fantastic. I think we'll leave the reach into the briefcase, pull it out, and slide it across the table from Micah there.
While you're smoking your cigarette, because it's 19. Folks, I wanted to say something. We have a book, Critical Path Career. We talked about interviews today. If you're looking to nail your next planning and scheduling interview, this book contains 26 interview questions. It contains the question, an example answer, and also a breakdown of what the company is asking for and why in those cases. If you haven't checked out the book, it's available on Amazon. You saw the commercial at the beginning. If you want to nail your next interview, this is the book. It also can stay on your shelf because it provides career advice as you go through. Are you looking for a promotion? Are you looking for landing a new job? Do you want more ideas that help set you apart from other planners and schedulers? This is your resource. Greg, it's been a pleasure interviewing you. After that question session, I'm changing my mind. I am hiring you. I'm bringing you on. I'm looking forward to getting started on building our schedule and hammering those GCs. No, just kidding. Working collaboratively with them to help
Working
build,
collaboratively.
working collaboratively to build them up, because at the end of the day, they're the ones creating the schedule and we need them to be successful. Folks, had a wonderful time. I'm just drowning on and blabbing. So what I'll say is the regular, we'll see you next week. Have a great one.